They told you the world rewards talent. They told you success is luck, timing, or privilege. They told you to be realistic, to stay in your lane, to lower your expectations so disappointment wouldn't crush you. But the truth is far more dangerous than that. The truth is this: the world does not give you what you want. It gives you what you are prepared to command. Every fortune ever built began the same way, not with money, not with connections, not with permission. It began with a decision inside the mind, a quiet, invisible shift where someone refused to think like the crowd ever again. Your mind is not neutral. It is programmed. And right now, whether you realize it or not, that programming is either building your future or silently sabotaging it. Look around. Most people are not failing because they are weak. They are failing because they have been conditioned, trained to doubt themselves, trained to confuse motion with progress, trained to obey fear disguised as logic. From childhood, you were handed beliefs you never chose, beliefs about money, beliefs about power, beliefs about what is possible for someone like you. And those beliefs became habits. Those habits became actions. Those actions became results. This is not philosophy. This is law. Henry Ford once said, "Whether you think you can or you think you can't, you're right. Not because thinking magically creates reality, but because thought is the architect of behavior, and behavior is the architect of destiny." Wealth is not an accident. Authority is not granted by chance. They are consequences of a mind that has been deliberately reprogrammed. Edison failed thousands of times before the light turned on, but he did not call it failure. He called it information. Most people would have stopped at the first embarrassment, the first rejection, the first sign that the world would not applaud them immediately. But Edison understood something the masses never do. The mind must be trained to persist long after emotion tells you to quit. Your first task is not action. It is not hustle. It is not strategy. Your first task is control. Control over what you allow to live rent-free in your thoughts. Control over the stories you repeat when no one is listening. Control over the inner voice that narrates your life when the lights are off. Because the mind does not respond to logic. It responds to repetition, emotion, and imagery. If you repeatedly see yourself as behind, you will behave like someone who is late to life. If you repeatedly see yourself as powerless, you will hesitate at moments that require boldness. If you repeatedly tell yourself wealth is for others, you will subconsciously reject opportunities that demand ownership. Andrew Carnegie did not build steel, he built belief. Belief so strong it bent circumstances around it. He surrounded himself with minds sharper than his own, not because he was weak, but because he understood leverage. Authority is never loud. It is calm. It is rooted. It does not ask. It decides. And this is where reprogramming truly begins. You must replace borrowed beliefs with chosen ones. Not affirmations you whisper once and forget, but convictions you live under pressure. The mind accepts what you consistently act upon. That is why discipline is not punishment. It is instruction. Every disciplined act tells the subconscious, this is who we are now. When you wake up early, instead of indulging comfort, you are not just winning the morning, you are teaching your identity to obey intention. When you follow through despite fear, you are installing a new self-image. When you delay gratification, you are training authority into your nervous system. Wealth responds to certainty. Life responds to clarity. The moment you decide, not wish, not hope, not dream, but decide who you are becoming, your behavior begins to reorganize itself around that identity. This is not motivation. This is mechanics. And the most powerful realization you will ever have is this: you do not rise to the level of your goals. You fall to the level of your self-concept. So if you want wealth, you must think like someone who commands resources. If you want authority, you must think like someone who expects responsibility. If you want power, you must become comfortable standing alone before results appear. Because the mind you have today created the life you see right now, and the mind you deliberately build from this moment forward will decide everything that comes next. Because once you understand that truth, you can no longer pretend you are a victim of circumstance. You stop blaming the economy. You stop blaming your past. You stop blaming people who never believed in you. You realize something far more confronting and far more empowering. Your outer world has been obeying your inner world with brutal precision. The mind is a garden. Left unattended, weeds grow automatically. Doubt does not need permission. Fear does not need effort. Limiting beliefs do not need encouragement. But purpose does. That is why most people drift while a few direct. That is why the many react while the few command. That is why the crowd consumes stories while the disciplined write history. The mind that creates wealth is not louder than others. It is quieter, more deliberate, more exacting. It chooses its inputs the way a general chooses a battlefield. Every image you consume, every word you repeat, every environment you tolerate is programming you, not symbolically, literally. When you repeatedly surround yourself with mediocrity, your standards erode. When you repeatedly listen to fear disguised as realism, your ambition shrinks. When you repeatedly accept chaos, your nervous system learns disorder, and a disordered mind cannot hold power. Lincoln understood this long before he ever held office. Ridiculed, defeated, dismissed, yet he refined his thinking in solitude while others sought approval in noise. Authority is born in silence long before it is recognized in public. This is why solitude is dangerous to the undisciplined and sacred to the focused. In silence, your true programming reveals itself. In silence, excuses collapse. In silence, you hear the difference between inherited beliefs and chosen convictions. Reprogramming begins when you stop asking, "What do I feel like doing?" and start asking, "What would the future version of me do right now?" That single question collapses time. It pulls identity forward. It forces alignment. The subconscious does not understand tomorrow. It understands now. So when you act today as the person you intend to become, you send a signal deeper than motivation. You send instruction. Walt Disney was bankrupt, mocked, and rejected more times than history remembers. But his mind was anchored to an image so vivid that rejection could not erase it. He did not negotiate with doubt. He did not seek validation from those who lacked vision. He obeyed the image, and that is the difference between fantasy and vision. Fantasy is entertained. Vision is obeyed. A reprogrammed mind does not argue with fear. It assigns it a seat and proceeds anyway. Courage is not the absence of fear. It is the refusal to let fear vote. This is where discipline transforms from effort into identity. You stop relying on emotion to move you. You stop waiting for confidence to arrive. You act first. Confidence follows. You train yourself to do what is required regardless of mood, because mood is unreliable and purpose is not. And over time, something profound happens. Resistance weakens, not because the world becomes easier, but because you become more exact. Gratitude sharpens this process. Not gratitude as politeness, gratitude as calibration. When you acknowledge progress, you reinforce momentum. When you acknowledge lessons, you extract power from pain. When you acknowledge effort, you strengthen self-trust. A mind trained in gratitude does not panic under pressure. It adapts, it learns, it adjusts without collapsing. Authority is not rigidity. It is responsiveness without chaos. Ford understood this when he revolutionized production. He was not the most technically skilled man in the room, but he was the most certain. And certainty organizes people, resources, and outcomes around it. Your mind must become that organizing force. You do this by demanding clarity from yourself daily. What matters now? What moves the needle? What must be done, even if it is uncomfortable? Clarity dissolves overwhelm. Purpose dissolves distraction. And repeated action dissolves doubt. The reprogrammed mind does not chase everything. It commits to something, and commitment creates gravity. Opportunities begin to align not because the universe is sentimental, but because focus removes friction. Energy stops leaking. Effort compounds. This is when wealth stops feeling distant and starts feeling inevitable. Not because you see it yet, but because you feel alignment. And alignment is power. You stop asking for permission. You stop explaining your ambition. You stop shrinking to keep others comfortable, because once the mind is trained, the posture changes, the walk changes, the decisions change, and the world responds accordingly, not instantly, not gently, but honestly, because lasting authority is never built on intensity alone. Intensity burns bright, then burns out. Authority is built on resilience, the quiet refusal to collapse when momentum slows and applause disappears. Most people mistake progress for speed. They believe if results don't arrive quickly, something must be wrong. So they pivot too soon, abandon too early, dilute their focus until nothing compounds. But history tells a harsher, truer story. Every figure you admire endured seasons where nothing moved, where effort produced silence, where belief had to survive without evidence. This is where the mind is truly tested. The reprogrammed mind understands delay is not denial. It is preparation. Roots grow in darkness. Strength is assembled invisibly. When setbacks arrive, and they will, the untrained mind panics. It personalizes resistance. It interprets friction as failure. But the disciplined mind interprets resistance as confirmation. Confirmation that it has reached the edge of comfort where growth begins. Resilience is not stubbornness. It is intelligent persistence. It is knowing when to hold the line and when to adapt the approach without abandoning the mission. Darwin didn't survive because he was strongest. He survived because he was adaptable. And adaptability is a mental skill long before it becomes a strategic one.
The mind programmed for authority does not cling to outdated identity. It evolves without losing direction.
It updates methods while protecting principles. This is why learning never ends for those who lead. The moment you believe you know enough, relevance begins to decay. The world is not static. Markets shift. Technology accelerates. Rules change. But the disciplined mind remains grounded because it is built on fundamentals, clarity, focus, and self-command. You train adaptability by asking better questions instead of seeking easier answers. What can this teach me? Where is the leverage? How does this strengthen me? Pain becomes data. Failure becomes feedback. Loss becomes refinement. And slowly, almost imperceptibly, something changes inside you. You stop reacting emotionally. You respond strategically. You no longer confuse urgency with importance. You no longer waste energy on things that do not matter in the long arc of your vision. This is how authority forms, not through domination, but through composure. People trust those who remain steady when outcomes are uncertain. Resources flow toward those who demonstrate patience under pressure. Influence follows those who can hold perspective while others spiral. The reprogrammed mind does not seek comfort. It seeks mastery. And mastery requires repetition. Not repetition driven by excitement, but repetition anchored in purpose, day after day, choice after choice, alignment after alignment. This is where most quit. Not because it is impossible, but because it is monotonous, because there are no fireworks in discipline, only quiet accumulation. But accumulation is how empires are built. You begin to realize that motivation is a visitor, structure is a resident. So you design your environment to support your future self. You reduce friction. You simplify decisions. You remove temptations that weaken resolve. This is not restriction. This is liberation. Because every unnecessary choice drains energy. And energy is currency. Wealth responds to those who manage energy as deliberately as money. Authority responds to those who conserve attention and deploy it intentionally. You stop explaining yourself to people who are not building anything. You stop arguing with opinions that do not pay your bills or shape your legacy. Silence becomes a strategy. Focus becomes a shield. And in that focused silence, confidence deepens. Not the loud, performative kind, but the unshakable kind that does not need to announce itself. You begin to trust yourself, and self-trust is the foundation of all power. Because when you trust yourself, hesitation fades. When hesitation fades, execution sharpens. When execution sharpens, results compound. This is how the mind graduates from desire to authority, not overnight, not effortlessly, but inevitably. And the most important realization of all begins to take hold. You are no longer chasing wealth. You are becoming someone who creates it naturally. You are no longer seeking authority. You are embodying it in how you think, decide, and act. The world does not need to be convinced. It will respond when the alignment is complete. Because there comes a moment, subtle, almost unnoticed, when the struggle changes texture. You still work, you still push, you still face resistance. But the resistance no longer feels personal, it feels procedural. This is when identity has shifted. You no longer ask, can I do this? You ask, what is required now? That question alone separates dreamers from builders. The reprogrammed mind understands that authority is not asserted. It is assumed through consistent alignment with principle. You stop waiting to feel ready. You stop rehearsing confidence. You operate from decision. This is how leaders move, quietly, deliberately, without asking for consensus. Power is not force. It is coherence. When your thoughts, actions, standards, and expectations move in the same direction, reality begins to cooperate. Not because it is kind, but because it responds to order. Chaos resists chaos. Order attracts resources. You begin to notice how often most people abandon themselves. They say they will act, then hesitate. They set standards, then negotiate them away. They make promises, then break them quietly, hoping no one notices. But your mind no longer tolerates that fracture. You understand that every broken promise weakens authority internally long before it shows externally. So you become precise with your word, especially the word you give yourself. This is self-respect at its highest level, and from self-respect comes presence. When you enter a room now, you are not scanning for approval. You are grounded, observant, centered, because the mind trained for wealth is not needy. It is selective. You no longer chase validation because you are anchored in purpose, and purpose stabilizes emotion. This is why true wealth does not panic in downturns. It reallocates. It adapts. It waits when necessary and strikes when aligned. You begin to see patterns others miss, opportunities disguised as inconvenience, leverage hidden inside difficulty. Because your mind is no longer clouded by urgency or fear. It is calm, and calm is lethal in a noisy world. This is the mindset Carnegie cultivated, the mindset Rockefeller refined, the mindset every enduring builder shared. They did not hurry. They positioned. They did not react. They anticipated, and anticipation is the highest form of intelligence. You stop measuring yourself by external timelines. You stop comparing chapters with someone else's highlight reel. You trust your process because you have built it deliberately. The hunger is still there, but it is disciplined now. It does not flail. It does not beg. It executes. And this is where gratitude deepens into something more powerful than appreciation. It becomes grounding. You are grateful not because everything is easy, but because you are capable. You are grateful not because obstacles disappeared, but because you no longer disappear when they appear. This stabilizes the nervous system, and a regulated nervous system can hold responsibility. Most people want wealth but cannot tolerate the pressure it brings. They want authority but cannot withstand scrutiny. They want freedom but resist structure. You no longer confuse freedom with absence of discipline. You understand freedom is the reward of discipline, so you lean into responsibility. You expand your capacity intentionally, and slowly others begin to defer to you, not because you demand it, but because you are consistent. Consistency builds trust. Trust builds influence. Influence builds authority, and authority multiplies wealth, not just financially, but mentally, emotionally, spiritually. You are no longer fragmented. You are integrated. Your mind does not pull you backward while your goals pull you forward. Everything moves in one direction. This is alignment, and alignment is unstoppable. You realize that nothing outside you needs to change for the transformation to be complete. The proof is already in how you move, how you decide, how you respond under pressure. You have reprogrammed the most powerful machine you will ever control, your mind. And now it works for you, not against you. You do not announce this change, you live it, because the highest authority is silent. And the greatest wealth begins where certainty no longer needs applause. The path is clear now, and you walk it, not hoping, not wishing, not waiting, but commanding each step forward.